Hey, it's FLPMA's 40th anniversary.
Wait, what is FLPMA? Do we still use that? More importantly, why should we even care?
FLPMA is shorthand for the Federal Land Policy and Management Act. It was an act of Congress that President Gerald Ford signed into law on October 21st, 1976, and it's the law that defines multiple use and sustained yield as BLM's approach to managing public lands. It's often called BLM's Organic Act since it gives us the authority to do lots of things we do on a daily basis.
Again, why should we care?
Well, there's six reasons.
Is one of those reasons that FLPMA mandates the permanent federal ownership of public lands?
Indeed, FLPMA makes it a law that public lands are retained in federal ownership. This may seem like a no-brainer, but until FLPMA became law, there was still a question about whether or not public lands were to be kept in federal control and made available for sale. Interestingly, FLPMA repealed President Lincoln's Homestead Act of 1864, ending homesteading. FLPMA tells BLM to do lots of stuff with public land, or as we like to call it, multiple use. Things like protecting scientific, scenic, historic, ecological, environmental, air and atmospheric, water resources, and archaeological resources. Whew! That's a mouthful. FLPMA requires that BLM provide food and habitat for fish and wildlife and domestic animals, and provide for outdoor recreation and other human uses too, things like timber, minerals, and grazing. Did you know that FLPMA repealed 1,000 out-of-date land management statutes? Really, 1,000. And it replaced them with new policies, including an entirely new planning system.
Well, it did do that. It didn't affect the big statutes like the ONC Act in Oregon, the Mineral Leasing Act, the Mining Law of 1872, the Soil Conservation Act, and about 1,000 others. But it did repeal and replace many that lingered from the days of the Grazing Service and the General Land Office. I'll give it that. Did you also know that FLPMA mandated a new planning system for us? One with lots of public participation, not just the involvement of those who may be directly affected by a decision.
The cool thing was, it authorized citizen advisory councils. We know those today as RACs. Another cool thing FLPMA did was it changed the way we manage mining and grazing on public lands.
For example, FLPMA declared that claims could be invalidated if miners didn't file copies of their claims and submit annual reports of their work, allowing the BLM and other miners to better know who was doing what and where. FLPMA also required a new study of grazing fees and standardized grazing permit policies. Grazing advisory boards were also focused on providing input into the development of allotment management plans, and they talked about how range improvement funds were to be distributed. FLPMA created new protections for public lands. That's pretty cool.
For example, FLPMA brought the Wilderness Act of 1964 to the public lands. The BLM now manages 9 wilderness areas and 88 wilderness study areas in Oregon and Washington. Contributing even more acronyms to BLM's repertoire, FLPMA also created ACECs, or as we like to call them, Areas of Critical Environmental Concern, where special management attention is required to protect and prevent irreparable damage to important historical, cultural, or scenic values, fish and wildlife resources, or other natural systems or processes, protect life and safety from natural hazards. Today, Oregon and Washington host 195 ACEC parcels totaling almost 860,000 acres. In addition, FLPMA granted new law enforcement authority to the BLM, starting with uniformed park rangers to serve the California desert's public lands. And finally, FLPMA helped to usher in a cultural change at the BLM.
BLM expanded its workforce beyond a focus on forestry and range conservation and created new professional positions in areas such as planning, recreation, archaeology, and wildlife biology. There are many more provisions within FLPMA, as well as several amendments made in later years. One of my favorite amendments is the Uquinahead Outstanding Natural Area, created in 1980 as an amendment to FLPMA. FLPMA helped solve a lot of BLM's challenges in the 1970s, but others remain today. Nevertheless, most of the work BLM does today can trace its authority back to FLPMA. As U.S. Senator from Washington, Scoop Jackson noted, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976 represents a landmark achievement in the management of the public lands of the United States. For the first time in the long history of the public lands, one law provides comprehensive authority and guidelines for their administration. That is a pretty compelling case. FLPMA really is important to America.